The attraction makes complete sense once the underlying psychology of both is understood clearly, not the surface-level sense of opposite types creating chemistry through contrast, though contrast is part of it. The deeper, structural sense of two people whose specific psychological configurations create, in encounter with each other, something that neither has encountered before and that both have been, in their different ways and from their different starting points, reaching toward without knowing precisely what they were reaching for. The empath has been reaching for someone to understand, not in the general sense of finding a person who is kind and considerate, in the specific sense of finding a person whose depth matches their own depth, whose interior is rich and complicated enough to warrant the quality of attention the empath brings to it. The empath's gift and the empath's burden are the same thing, the capacity for depth of perception and depth of feeling that makes ordinary connection feel insufficient. Most interactions skim the surface. Most people, engaged with at the empath's natural depth, have less interior than the engagement assumes. The empath has spent their relational life searching, often without naming the search, for the person whose inside matches the outside of what the empath's perception reaches for. The avoidant is that person. Whatever the surface presentation suggests, the composure, the self-containment, the performed self-sufficiency, the avoidant's interior is an extraordinary landscape, rich, complicated, alive with suppressed feeling and unprocessed experience, and the specific, layered depth that comes from spending decades managing a profound interior life rather than simply having one. The avoidant is, beneath the management, one of the most interesting people the empath has ever encountered. And the empath, whose perception reaches beneath surfaces with an accuracy that the avoidant's defenses were not designed to withstand, sees this immediately. The avoidant has been reaching for something different. They have been reaching without acknowledging the reaching, without having the language for what is missing in the connections that are available. For someone whose presence does not activate the management protocol. For someone warm enough to generate genuine feeling without generating the intimacy pressure that the feeling usually brings. For someone whose caring arrives without the demand weight that caring usually carries. For someone, in the most precise articulation, who can meet the avoidance depth without requiring the avoidance vulnerability in a form that the fear cannot accommodate. The empath, in the specific configuration of the healthy, grounded, self-possessed empath, comes closest to providing this. Their depth is present without being consuming. Their caring arrives from abundance rather than from need. Their perception of the avoidance interior, accurate, specific, deeply felt, does not weaponize the perception or use it to push the avoidant toward an exposure they are not ready for. They see and they stay with the seeing, and the staying is not a demand. It is simply presence. The attraction then is the recognition, both people encountering in the other something they have been unable to find elsewhere. The empath encounters depth genuinely worth attending to, the rare interior that rewards the quality of perception the empath brings and does not exhaust itself under the attention. The person behind the management who is, in the glimpsed moments of genuine contact, exactly the kind of person the empath has been hoping was possible. The avoidant encounters safety they cannot generate the management protocol against, the specific, rare, entirely non-demanding quality of someone who is fully present, fully engaged, fully interested, and not pressing. Not bringing the weight of need that closeness usually brings, not requiring the avoidant to be more or different or less defended in a way that feels like an imposition rather than an invitation. The recognition is immediate, mutual, and entirely genuine. The pull toward each other is not a misreading or a projection or the hopeful inflation of something ordinary into something significant. It is the accurate registration of genuine encounter. Two people whose specific configurations fit together in a specific way that is unusual enough to produce the specific quality of connection that neither easily finds elsewhere. And then the fear arrives, in both. The empath's fear is familiar to anyone who has examined their pattern with any honesty. It is the fear that the depth they are seeing in the avoidant is not matched by the avoidant's capacity to meet them in it, that the perception is accurate. The avoidant is genuinely what the empath perceives them to be, but the capacity to express and sustain the relationship that the depth implies is insufficient. That the empath will fall entirely, will bring their full, unguarded, entirely committed capacity for love to the connection, and will find the avoidant unable to receive it in the form it is offered. That the relationship will be genuine and one-sided simultaneously, real in its feeling, insufficient in its expression. That the empath will love someone who loves them back in the interior and fails them consistently in the exterior. This fear is not irrational. It is the accurate projection of a pattern that the empath, if they have any relational history with avoidance, has encountered before. The empath is perceptive enough to see the avoidance depth and kind enough to stay for it, and wounded enough by the previous experiences of loving people who could not sustain the expression of what they felt to know with the specific, uncomfortable accuracy of someone who has been here before, exactly what the connection is reaching toward and exactly what the cost of it is likely to be. The avoidance fear is different in form but similar in structure. It is the fear that the empath's perception is too accurate, that the seeing of them, the specific, non-judgmental, entirely clear-eyed seeing of the actual interior rather than the managed presentation, will eventually reach the parts of them that the management is most specifically designed to protect. The fear, the need, the longing that would be exposed by genuine, sustained intimacy with someone whose perception cannot be fooled by the performance. The avoidant is afraid in the precise and structural sense of being known by the person who is most capable of knowing them, because the knowing by this person in this depth would make the denial of the knowing impossible, and the denial of the knowing, the maintenance of the fiction, that the interior is less complicated, less needing, less loving than it actually is the fiction that the entire self-sufficiency narrative depends on. The empath, simply by being capable of the perception they are capable of, threatens the fiction at its foundation. What the attraction and the fear produce together is the specific, genuinely agonizing dynamic that anyone who has been in an empath-avoidant connection will recognize. The pull that keeps both people returning to the connection despite the fear. The closeness that forms in the windows when the fear is quiet and the attraction is louder. The retreat that follows the closeness when the fear reasserts itself. The specific, recurring hope and then disappointment cycle that the combination of genuine attraction and genuine fear produces when neither is adequately processed. The empath keeps returning because the depth is real. Because the person glimpsed in the windows of genuine contact is the person the empath has been searching for. Because walking away from a connection that is real, in a world where real connections are rare, requires the specific courage of someone who has accepted that real and sufficient are not the same thing. The avoidant keeps returning because the safety is real, because the specific quality of the empath's non-demanding presence, the warmth without the weight, the seeing without the weaponizing, is something the avoidance nervous system has been searching for without knowing it was searching, because the windows of genuine contact with the empath are the closest the avoidant has come to the experience of genuine intimacy that does not cost the self-dissolution that intimacy has always previously threatened. Both are right about what they found in the other. Both are right about what they fear losing. Both are navigating, with insufficient tools and genuine feeling, the specific challenge of a connection that is real in its depth and complicated in its expression, where the attraction is as genuine as the fear, and the fear is as structural as the attraction, and neither can be simply resolved through the correct application of will or insight, or the desire for things to be different than the psychology of both people currently makes them. The resolution, if resolution is possible, and it is not always possible, and the honest acknowledgement of when it is not, is one of the most important things either person can do requires both people to work toward the same internal destination from different starting points. The empath needs to move toward the capacity to hold the real and the insufficient simultaneously without collapsing the real into denial or inflating it into the justification for tolerating the insufficient indefinitely. To see the avoidant clearly, the depth and the limitation, the genuine love and the genuine incapacity, and to make decisions from that clear seeing rather than from the partial seeing that either the attraction or the protection of the self produces. The avoidant needs to move toward the capacity to let the empath's seeing be received rather than fled from. To discover through the repeated, corrective, counter-instinctive experience of remaining present in the empath's non-judgmental perception that being known does not produce the catastrophe that the fear has always promised, that the interior the management has been protecting is not too much for someone whose perceptiveness is as developed as the empath's, that the fiction of self-sufficiency, however long maintained, is not more valuable than the genuine connection that its maintenance has been preventing. These are not small movements. They are, for both people, the most demanding internal work available in the context of a relationship. They require courage from both sides, the empath's courage to hold clear seeing without losing the warmth that makes the seeing bearable, and the avoidant's courage to remain in the presence of the seeing without retreating from what it reveals. The attraction is not a mistake. The fear is not a failing. Both are the accurate, structural responses of two people whose psychologies were shaped by specific experiences into specific configurations that fit together in the specific way that genuine attraction always fits, with both the promise of something extraordinary and the challenge of everything that makes extraordinary things difficult to sustain. The fit is real, the work it requires is real, and the question, the one that each person has to answer for themselves in the honest privacy of their own reckoning, is whether the real of the fit is worth the real of the work, not in theory, in the specific, daily, imperfect, costly reality of two people trying to become what the connection between them has always been asking them to be.